Good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Thursday, September 9th, 2021. And our top story today, a prudent process for the cybersecurity of your benefit programs. Well, joining me now to discuss this and a lot more, David Levine is a principal with Groom Law Group, an employee benefits law firm based in Washington, D.C. David, so great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Jeff, thanks for having me. It's good to see you too.
It's great to talk with you. We're going to talk about cybersecurity and privacy and a prudent process, and we'll do a lot of that in segment 2, but let's kind of tee it up. Why are we talking about cybersecurity? Why is this an important topic for those of us in the benefits industry and in general?
Sure. Well, it's important because, let's look at the macro themes that are out there, Jeff, at this point. Data breach is a part of life, and loss of data is huge. We saw Equifax a couple years ago is number one. We've seen everything from major retailers to online retailers to you name it, healthcare companies and everything where you get breached. How many of us have stacks and stacks at this point of 2 years of free credit monitoring? For instance, if you're one of the 50 million or 100 million people who have T-Mobile, congratulations. You may be getting credit monitoring now based on recent news. But you shouldn't throw stones at glass houses because everybody lives in a glass house. If you talk to cybersecurity experts, it's not a matter of if you will be hacked, but when. And it's especially relevant in the area of retirement and healthcare for one big reason. Think about the data that's involved there. If someone hacks your loyalty card at a big retailer, they might know that you were buying, diapers for your child. And maybe they'll get your credit card, but you can replace a credit card number. But they don't usually carry at a retailer, for instance, your social security number, or they don't carry your medical history, or they don't carry your financial bank account information where you get debits all the time. And all in your home address and your secret passwords, a lot of stuff that you use for your personal security of financial information. Retirement, in some ways, is like the holy grail of data because you get social security numbers, you get asset information, especially in a era where you allow people to aggregate data and do wellness modeling. There's a lot of information there. So that's why we're talking about it, number one. Number two, there have been breaches in the retirement space, so it's important to keep it in mind. Now, there's two different types of breach that I think it's important to think about when we're talking with everyone today. One, I'll call it the fraudulent breach. The fraudulent breach has been around for a long, long time, Jeff. Where basically someone impersonates someone who lives in your house gets your information, like if you have an estranged family member or something like that. Fraud happens, but oftentimes that's woven into the cybersecurity discussion at this point and considered a breach. But realistically, yes, in the era of online access and being able to do things electronically, there's a lot of focus about what are your controls there. But then there is an even bigger concern about mass access to data. For any of you who ever worked for the federal government, you probably know that many years ago there was a hack of the OPM, the organization that manages personnel for the federal government. And fingerprints, information were just taken out of there for like all federal employees or anybody who had a security check. That's what I call a mass breach. Have we had as many of those in the retirement plan space? No, and that's a good thing. But you have to be ready in case that happens, because if it does, no amount of insurance, if someone actually starts draining accounts before it gets caught, will probably cover the amount that could be taken because accounts add up. A $100 million policy, which a lot of people carry, if you have a stack of $1 million accounts, that'll be burned off quickly. So the good news is the industry hasn't had many of those breaches, if any, but that's the two reasons why we're focused on this.
And David, thanks for that, David. And our regulators, the Department of Labor, the Employee Benefits Security Administration, and other entities, SEC, they've got their hands full with a lot of things that we talk about on a regular basis with you and your colleague, Kevin Walsh. But they're also focused on cybersecurity and privacy. This is one of the, I kind of think of it like tentacles, but this is one of the tentacles that they are really honing in on this year and in the 2022.
I wholeheartedly agree. And the SEC has taken enforcement actions against advisors who are not securing data well at this point. The DOL has its tips, which is not formal guidance, as Kevin and I have talked about before, but people are treating it like it is, and they're using it in enforcement. So whether or not it's guidance, it's something to look to at this point, and they're using it in investigations, and they're gathering, and there's a lot of information. So it's not just a theoretical, could it be lost? It's also the regulators are going to come take a look at you. So it's an important thing to keep those two items in mind.
Yeah, and David, when you're attending client meetings, and there are a lot of things that I'm sure you're talking about outside of some of these, plan documents, investment returns, investment policy, those are, I guess, core fiduciary things. How prevalent is conversations like cybersecurity? Are plan sponsors getting questions, for example, from participants? Are they raising questions in these benefit meetings that you're having with clients?
Sure, and it's coming up a lot in our committee and fiduciary meetings. Yes, are participants asking questions every so often? Yes, we've had people say, why do they have this? Why do they have this? That definitely comes up. You're more likely to get questions if there's a breach, and thankfully, as I said, there haven't been widespread breaches. Because believe it or not, the industry puts a lot of effort, especially the record keepers, into data security, and some of what they do is really impressive. They've hired some really good people and put a lot of resources there. But putting that aside, yes, plan fiduciaries, this is a high topic for meetings, whether it's following the tips. I have clients, we've done a lot of work on diligence on all providers, not just the record keepers, the advisors. It's also a big discussion because in an era of additional services, whether it's distribution advice, managed account, wellness, other types of student loans, there's more data than ever being gathered and shared. Sometimes it's done with your mainline, I'll call it traditional record keepers, but there's some great startups out there that have this as well. So part of the process, especially in larger plans, is saying, well, what data security standards are going to apply for the larger plans? Is there a specific requirement as to how you do this? No, there is not. But these discussions are certainly top of mind for a lot of folks at this point, Jeff.
Yeah. Well, David, as I said, we want to talk about a prudent process in the second segment, and I need to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk more with David and thinking about a prudent process for managing cybersecurity. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. We're talking to David Levine of Groom Law Group. David, thanks as always for staying with us this morning.
It's my pleasure to be on the B block, Jeff.
Yeah, the B, A, you name it, you're there, David. Let's talk about a prudent process. And your colleagues, Kevin Walsh, who we know very well, but also Allison Itami, both of Groom Law, wrote a great piece for Plan Sponsor about a prudent process. What does a prudent process for cybersecurity management look like? Or at least from the infrastructure point of view?
Sure, absolutely. And I agree. Ali and Kevin wrote a really great piece. I encourage people to check it out.
It's right here, in case you want to zoom in. No, I'm kidding.
I'll be glad to read it. I'll do a staged reading. That'll consume our entire segment, Jeff. But let's talk about this. First of all, remember this is an evolving world. Number two, there is no one specific right or wrong. I know sometimes plaintiffs' attorneys will say it should be done this way. ERISA is a broad-based, flexible statute, so it's important to keep that in mind. It's also why, despite whether the DOL or someone says this is a best practice, Jeff has heard this speech from me before, as have some of you listeners, there's not one way you must do things. It's important to figure out what works for your plan. So stepping down a further item here, if you're a micro plan, you have $200,000 of assets in your 401k plan. That's a very different discussion than if you have $10 billion. Both in terms of resource and monitoring. The DOL has recognized this. It's not that ERISA says small plans have different rules, but there's practicalities here that need to be kept in mind as you do this, because it's sort of, you're still trying to do what's for the best interest of participants and beneficiaries, but there's different leverage, different activities. For instance, in a small plan, if you ask, and this is in terms of a process item, Jeff, in a small plan, if you start out, you might go to your vendor and say, tell me about your cybersecurity. They're going to give you a bunch of glossies probably that say, this is our cybersecurity, this is our protection guarantee or protection program. Most people have some type of framework saying if there's a breach, this is what happens. But they're not going to give you like dozens of pages of information security all the time. Some vendors will, some won't. And there's reasons to and to not. You don't want to give away the keys to the kingdom that if you get it, that if you as a sponsor get hacked, someone else can figure out how to get in. So there's real reasons that are right to sometimes say no. But the first step is gathering information, whether big or small, and saying, what are your security guarantees? And to say, okay, let's look at our vendors. Let's look at everybody who gets plan data. The record keeper key, investment companies, not usually. Maybe your advisor gets data, maybe some other provider, wellness, or someone else gets data. Figure out who gets the data. Then sort of, all right, take the DOL tips and sort of say, what are we doing? How have we complied with these? Again, they're not law, but it's good to sort of try to weave that in because they provide some good insights that you take the valuable items out of them as applicable to you. You see what you can get in terms of follow-up. It doesn't need to be this detailed written process. Bigger plans may be more written. You might just do this in an interview with your vendor at a quarterly or semi-annual or annual update with the vendor. And then figure out, where are we? Now, because you also get into a discussion of contracting. And I've been on all sides of the contracting. First of all, there's sometimes a desire to say, tell me everything. As I already said, your vendors will not want to tell you everything out of the box, because the idea that they're going to tell you all their secret security controls, their secret sauce, that sets them up for a breach, because what are your controls then? And you need to think about your own controls. You have to do the best you can. But if you're a plan that has detailed negotiated contracts, you say, well, all right, with whom can I negotiate more protections? If you're a smaller plan, you might not have the leverage. So you need to think about what product you're in, what solution, especially remembering again, it's not just record keepers, it's the full ecosystem, because the weak link is always it. Now, the reality is, as I said, breaches are going to happen. No matter what you say. It's actually impressive that the industry has had so little in terms of mass breaches at this point. That's a real positive. But then my other piece is, after all those negotiation process items, it's worth a look inward to say, what are my processes? What are my controls? Many of you who deal with retirement plans also deal with HIPAA and healthcare privacy. Look to some of those analogies. But one thing I will say, our industry has a cottage industry sometimes of saying you need a policy statement for X or Y or Z. I personally believe that if you're going to create more paper, make a paper that's not too rigid and things you can follow. But there's nothing saying you need a data privacy statement, but some people like them. But if you're going to do it, you got to follow it and think about what you put in there or not. A lot of the times we generate cookie cutter documents across our industry that sometimes add more burden, and maybe there's an easier way to do things. So that's one thing from a process standpoint I'd put on the list, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, and David, I mean, would you expect, I don't know what you call them in the Department of Labor, I know in the IRS they're called examiners, but those that are asking questions of plan sponsors, maybe it's an auditor, I don't know. But would you expect...
Investigator, Jeff.
Investigator, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Sorry,
No,
Department of Labor.
I'm just answering the question. Happy to say it.
Oh, yeah, so if you're an investigator, are you seeing investigators ask questions around, this may not be formal guidance, but they're tips. Are they asking questions? And so would it behoove a plan sponsor of a benefit plan, a retirement plan, a healthcare plan, to use the remainder of 2021 to do as you suggest, document, because you don't know when you might be getting a question from one of these investigators about your plan and your processes?
The answer is I will not say you must do it, but it is something
Sure.
that I think could be a great item to do. And I will tell you, I've seen the investigations, like we got our first questions on these before the tips even came out. We got them last fall in an investigation. And a lot of it was just information gathering. It's pretty high level. And the questions, depending on which regional office, the DOL has all these regional offices, are a little different, but they're pretty close. But the questions have been morphing and getting a little more detailed over the last 6 months, and they continue to evolve. As these questions develop, I think that they will get deeper and deeper. I think the analogy I would use here is anybody who was doing this a decade ago probably remembers the early days of fee disclosure, where the Department of Labor would ask you, hey, can you just give me your fee disclosure? Did you get it? That's kind of the stage we've been in. But they're slowly moving into, okay, can you tell me more about how this works? And it's good to try to stay ahead of the curve. As I said, there's no one right or wrong, but that's a good potentially positive thing to do in late 21 and even into 22.
Yeah, document, have conversations, make sure you document all that. David Levine, it is always a pleasure chatting with you. I always feel smarter after we're finished our segments, and believe me, that takes a lot of effort. Good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you back on the program soon.
Thank you, Jeff. Have a great morning, and thanks for having me.
That wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. We're back again tomorrow. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Are you being audited and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.